Hi, Intuitive viewers, and welcome. I am going to introduce you to someone very special today, and hopefully she's going to help us out, help me out. I'd like to introduce you to Tamara Zoner. Hi, Tamara.
Hi, Kim.
Tamara you may recognize her if you saw the interview that I did on her podcast that she has with John Davis. It's called Spirit Cafe. She's the co-host of Spirit Cafe. And then she also has her own YouTube channel, and it's called Tamara Zoner, Zoner, right?
Yes.
Tamara. And she's also a life coach. She is a passion test facilitator, which we will talk about that. Has mastery of self-love, and she is a facilitator for that. She's a happy for no reason trainer, which I love. She's a speaker, and she's also an ordained minister. So welcome, Tamara. I'm so happy to have you here.
Thank you. I'm so excited to be here.
Now, tell me, I have to ask you about being an ordained minister first and how that came about, just real quick.
It was kind of one of those, I really feel like my coaching is more ministry. And when I first came back to Michigan, I had this deep desire also to be able to marry the people who wanted to marry because they loved each other. And that was becoming legal in Michigan. And so I decided to take this little online quick course and become ordained so that I could legally perform ceremonies. And my coaching really is more ministry. So it felt right and it felt good. And I got to renew my own parents' wedding vows at their 50th anniversary party. And I married my sister-in-law's mom and her new husband. And it's lovely.
Oh, wow. That's
one
amazing.
More little tool. I love the tools.
That's amazing. What a great way to use the passion that you have to kind of join people. That's beautiful. I'm so glad I asked about that. that's amazing. So I wanted to talk to you because I know that you're all about, being positive and being happy. And, and I came across a Twitter feed in the middle of the night, which this is where I wanted to start with you, which you shouldn't, just by the way, don't read Twitter in the middle of the night. Don't do it. It's not a good idea.
I'd fastly avoid it. So
fastly avoid it. But you do those things when you're just kind of trying to get to sleep. So I came across this Twitter feed, and the question somebody asked just kind of threw out there into the ether. I feel like I've been in kind of a low-grade depression since COVID started, and I don't feel like I've come out of it. How is everybody feeling? And the feed just went on and on and on. Just people feeling a lot of people saying, like, I thought we'd be out of this by now. I didn't know we'd have like people pushing back, like not allowing us to move forward and being, unwilling to do what they needed to do to help us get out of this. I, feel like we are stagnant, like we're not moving in some way. I feel like we are, and a lot of things about, I thought we'd be back to normal, a lot of talking about being back to normal and not being back to normal yet. And so it just kind of made me think, when we're in a situation like this where we don't know how long this is going to take, we don't know where we're going to be. We may be out of this in a few months. It may be another year or two. We don't know. So how should we be approaching this in our minds? How should we be approaching this with our thoughts? And how should we be dealing with this internally, day to day, with this kind of uncertainty that everybody has? And so where should we start, Tamara?
That's a really huge question.
I know.
We start where we do for any challenging circumstance in our lives, by allowing ourselves to feel what we're feeling, by, instead of resisting all that's coming up for us in the unknown and the discomfort and the unease and dis-ease, we simply allow ourselves to feel it, but not necessarily to linger there. So we allow ourselves to feel it, to feel what we're feeling, to process our emotions, to give it everything that we're feeling a voice, to have collective empathy for one another in this experience. And then what we have to do is to choose in favor of what feels good for us. And so it's a cycle, on my channel and everywhere I show up, I talk a lot about this natural cycle of expansion and contraction. And we as humans, as part of nature, we're always moving through this, right? We expand, we contract. The sun comes out and then it sets. Summer blooms and then winter comes back. We're constantly expanding and contracting. And if we can look at that more contracted phase as an opportunity for self-reflection and rest, then it doesn't hurt so much and it doesn't feel so bad. And instead, it's this opportunity for us to take greater care of ourselves. And I feel like that's what COVID has been for the whole earth and all of us on it. We have had this opportunity to really slow down, look within, feel out what really matters, and start showing up differently. And I remember what David Johnson said on the interview that you had with him, where he talked about being able to choose every day how we show up for our neighbors, how we show up for the people. Are you going to choose kindness and compassion toward others, or are you going to choose a more selfish, it's just me out here way of living? And I think that we blend that. We have to tune into what feels good for us and right, and also be aware of how we impact one another, both in our decisions in the physical world and the way that we caretake our emotional body.
I think that's so wise. I mean, it's so what you're saying is so wise. And I think, I was thinking about, sometimes I think, and because you're talking about the dis-ease and the unease, and I'm thinking that perhaps we are, which we do a lot of times, we misremember the past.
Oh, for sure.
And I'm wondering about how, because people keep saying we want to get back to normal. And I wonder if people remember what normal was, because I remember normal as being people working 2 and 3 jobs, unable to stop, unable to spend time with their family, unable to have a moment to themselves, just on this treadmill, just going. And I think that I think that people are, because it was that's what we were used to, that's what we need to get back to. And I just, right?
Perfect. Yes. So here's the thing.
Right.
Our subconscious minds love the status quo, and it's terrified of change. And it doesn't matter if the change is positive or negative. It just doesn't like change. And it doesn't matter if our status quo is really, really wonderful or terribly uncomfortable. It just likes the known. So any new change that we implement in our lives, even if it's making healthier nutritional choices or deciding to implement exercise into our lives, our subconscious mind says, whoa, wait a second. That's not what I'm used to.
What's this?
Well, let's reevaluate, because my job is to keep you safe, and the safe is what we know. And so anytime the world around us changes, our circumstances change, or we decide to implement change, we have to really start buddying up with that subconscious mind and giving it permission to move into this new way of being. And you're right, we don't want to go back to that old normal. I worked in senior living for 6 years, and each time a resident would have sort of what they might look at as a setback, or maybe they'd have a fall and an injury or a procedure done, and then they couldn't quite get back to normal. And I would tell them, and I would tell your audience and the world, that we have a new normal. And so we get to adjust. We don't have to. We get to adjust to this new normal and this new way of being, and let ourselves move forward in it. Most of your viewers, you probably know, we suffer when we live in the past or the future. We suffer when we argue with our own thoughts. We suffer, I love Byron Katie, when we argue with reality. She says, when you argue with reality, you lose, and only 100% of the time.
Right.
Right? That argument with our own thoughts and reality causes us to suffer. And so if we can choose actively to question those thoughts, to get curious, to ask, are these thoughts really serving me, or are they hurting me? And could I set them aside, or could I maybe edit them, tweak them, create new ones that feel better and nourish me instead of deplete me? Then that's how we can move forward into our new normal, which I think will be a much better normal than what was.
Right, right. Absolutely. I completely agree with that. And like I said, just like you said, just, so beautifully that, comfortable is not necessarily good. It's just what we know. It's just the known.
Exactly.
There could be something so much better out there. We need to, like you said, kind of lean into the experience rather than shrink away from it.
Yes.
Yeah, I love that. So I want to talk to you a little bit about depression, because I feel like, this, when I started this question, I talked a little bit about like a low grade depression people have felt. And I feel like I'm not I'm an empath, so I feel everything. I feel everything very deeply.
Yeah.
And so even other people's emotions. And
Sure.
so I feel like I am more wired to, I'm not saying depression, but I'm more wired to kind of go there as a person. I'm just wired that way. My family has a history of depression, and about 2014, my turning point with depression came when I read A New Earth by Eckhart Tolle.
Mm-hmm.
He's all about living in the now. That's what he's all about.
Yes.
And once I realized, okay, I have control over my thoughts. I don't have to go back to the past and think coulda, shoulda, woulda. I don't have to worry about the future. I just have to be here. And it also coincides with a message that I continually get from Spirit for my for the channels, since we've had kind of this upheaval in our political life, that either go small, 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 moment to moment to moment,
Right.
or go big, big, big. Go like the bigger spiritual kind of, what is the bigger spiritual take, or what is the historical view of this? But don't linger in the middle where you're kind of thrust back into the past and the future, and kind of like in this tug of war. And so it kind of goes with that. But can you talk a little bit about how we're wired to the negative, in a I guess a biological way,
Yes.
and also how to control and be aware of that thought process that might drag us down.
Yeah, I feel like this is one of the most important things people can learn. Like, it's our actual biology to pay more attention to the negative. It is how our brains are wired. It's called the negativity bias. And there's a great book called Hardwiring Happiness by Rick Hansen, if your viewers are interested. And
I'm writing it down right now.
Okay. In fact, one of your listeners asked after I talked about that on either your interview or the podcast, I don't know. But and he talks about this negativity bias, and he talks about how we're actually designed to Velcro the negative. And if you go back, thousands and tens of thousands of years, this is how we evolved, by paying attention to what was dangerous so that we could survive. We could remember where those dangers were, get away from them, remember the dangerous berries so we didn't eat them, remember where those cave lions lived so we didn't go near there. And our brains have not changed that fight, flight, or freeze response in all of these thousands of years. We still have that negativity bias. We still Velcro that negative. And so the great thing, though, is that we also have something called neuroplasticity, and we can create new neural pathways in our brains. Every single time we do something new, we are creating a new neural pathway in our brain. Just like when a baby stands up and takes a step for the first time, a little path lights up in their brain. And if they do it again, it gets stronger and stronger and stronger until it's like a well-cut path through a forest. And we can flip that negativity bias into a positivity bias and Velcro the positive instead of the negative by simply looking for the good. That's all we have to do. But we have to look for it. And I was on this tangent today on my own Facebook page and Instagram, is that we really have to start looking for it, noticing it and savoring it and letting it really seep in, because guess what? It takes no time at all for our brains to register a negative. And it takes at least 20 seconds for our brains to register a positive to create that neural pathway or to strengthen it. And so we really have to like soak it in and savor it and be like, oh, that person just smiled at me or held the door open, or that's a beautiful sunrise or sunset, and really allow those positive emotions and feelings to wash over us and almost like hold on to them like a good hug, which is also an amazing thing and releases oxytocin. I love hugs. Yeah, a 20-second hug releases oxytocin, which is that bonding hormone, and one of the most vital happiness chemicals in our brain. And so by savoring those good things, by really immersing ourselves in them, we can strengthen those neural pathways in our brains for the positive. And the more we do that, the easier it gets. And so I'm like an expert at this now, because I have been, practicing this for the last 8 years, really practicing gratitude, practicing looking for what's right, practicing catching my thoughts when they're not supportive. And the other rule of thumb, so look for the good, savor the good, and then lean into 3 positives for every 1 negative. So if I do have that, usually my negative thoughts come about while I'm driving, specifically in a roundabout often. And so if I have a negative thought, then I'm like, oops, caught me. I will now, what are 3 good thoughts? Okay, well, gosh, that's a gorgeous tree. Or this person probably just saved me from getting a ticket. Or maybe they have a fish tank in their car and they're driving really carefully so that it doesn't splash around. I always use that example when my daughter is 16 and going through, driver's training. I'm like, be patient, because they could have a fish tank or a new baby. Or we don't know. We don't know what other people are experiencing or why they're doing the things that they're doing, but we get to make up the stories and make up the meaning. So make them good.
That's such a good idea. I never thought, and you're right. We can use our imaginations to our benefit, right?
Yes, and we use them all the time for the negative. Why not write a good story?
Right. That's such a great point, and something I will use from now on. So it's interesting because you mentioned hugs, and that physical touch and how that can be such a benefit to our reversing depression or feeling sad. What has it done to us in COVID with not having that, especially people like that are single, living alone, that maybe were separated from loved ones for months and months, and maybe still are. Maybe they're elderly and they don't feel like their family isn't vaccinated, or they're nervous or worried, or what does that do to you when you lack that? What happened to our country when we all had to separate and no hugs, first of all, I'm sure it made us appreciate it so much more, that handshake, that hug, that touch. But what did it do to us, do you think, neurologically and inside?
It definitely impacted us. It definitely was depleting, and we need that connection. We're also wired for that. We're an interrelated species, and we need interaction, and we need connection. We need connection.
Right.
And so that definitely had an impact. And I did see it in senior living, because my seniors were quarantined to their apartments for the 3 months, and they came out really depressed and withdrawn. And one of the things I started teaching people was, another fun fact about our brains is that they don't know what is real or imagined. Right. Our bodies respond the same way. And so I taught people to hug themselves and really imagine that you're hugging that person that you love so much. And again, you imagine, you do this for 20 seconds, you hug yourself, you imagine you're hugging that person that you love and you miss, and your body will release that oxytocin on its own without the other person present, just by you imagining that hug.
That is a wonderful suggestion. And not only that can be used not only for people that are that you're missing that are here living, but it could work for people that you miss that have passed away as
Yes,
well, right?
absolutely. Absolutely.
That's a great idea. And for me, I know that um, just because I know from doing my just the medium work that I do, I know that whenever you think of a loved one, they're there.
Yeah.
It's almost like a a spiritual law in a way that they show up when you invoke them in a thought or a memory. They're with you. And so the idea that if you were taking that time to embrace yourself as this loved one, they will show up.
Oh,
I
I
can
love
tell you that for sure.
so
So
much.
that is something that you can do that. And especially at this time when it's just so people are so lonely, missing people, reviewing the past, those things, it all comes up. So that's great, Tamara. I love that. It also reminds me of when you talk about looking for the positive, it reminds me of that famous Mr. Rogers episode. I don't know if you know about this episode, but after 9/11, he told children that were afraid and said, this can be really scary to see these images on television, but look for the helpers. Look for the helpers.
Yes.
And that's what you're talking about
Yeah.
when you're or that idea of like look for the good, even in something as devastating as 9/11, you can
Especially
see there.
in
Yeah.
something so devastating. I always say, especially in the most challenging circumstances, and practice these tools when it's not so terrible so that they're available to you when it gets really rough.
That's exactly right. And I find myself, because every once in a while I will have still a bad day where I just feel like, oh, I can't do this anymore. What's going on? And I will actively, it is a choice.
Mhm.
You have to, and some of us have to work at it harder than other people.
Absolutely.
So I feel like, if you find yourself slipping, so that's one thing I want to ask you is when you find yourself kind of going down the rabbit hole, what are some just practical things people can do to just kind of wake themselves up and say, okay, I'm going to choose differently? What would you suggest? Okay, so I'm in a state where I've just watched the news, I've just gotten on Twitter, everyone's having a great time, I'm depressed because I just read the news, so it's all coming to on top of me. What do I do if I'm, especially like teenagers? I think of like young people and stuff that they look online and think everyone's having a great life, and then my life's not so great, and all this stuff is happening in the world and I can't do anything about it, powerless. Where do you start when you get in start to go down that road?
Well, let's back it up before we get to that road, because we can do some preventative maintenance, right?
Okay.
We can, first of all, nourishment and happiness is not just, sleep or exercise or food and enough water. Our nourishment is everything that we consume, and that includes the news, it includes the Twitter feeds, it includes the Facebook and the comparative process of, oh, but their life is better than mine. So first of all, I would say cut it way down. Mm-hmm. I strongly recommend very limited news intake, and never first thing in the morning or last thing at night, ever, ever, ever. Never within the first 2 or the last 2 hours of your day. Sandwich it in the middle and sandwich it between.
And why is that? Why do you say never the beginning and never the end? Just
research shows that the first 30 minutes of your day can set the tone for like the next 12 hours of your day. And people who start off with something negative, whether they, run into the wall getting out of bed, which happens to me sometimes, I'm clumsy, or they pick up their phone and immediately start reading the news, or they turn on the TV and watch the news. People who do that and have a negative information coming at them first thing in the morning within those first 30 minutes report lower moods 8 hours later. And so that's key. And then the end of the day, you are programming your brain with those visuals and those words, and you are going to spend the night reprocessing that in your dreams. I don't want that in my mind as I sleep and try to heal from the day and let my body restore and refresh. And so it also, makes it harder to fall asleep. And so it's a really good idea in general for healthy sleep habits, which sleep matters so much in our happiness, to tune out of the media a few hours before bed and tune in to your inner quiet. You can definitely read a book, a nice story, but simply be mindful of what you're consuming a couple of hours before bed, because it is going to ruminate. And I know for me, I can speak from personal experience, when I watch a scary movie or even a super action-packed kind of not so feel good movie before bed, that's what shows up in my dreams.
Right.
And then I'm still in that experience. And then my brain is still, releasing correlating chemicals, which maybe aren't so good for me. But on the other hand, if I sit down and write out gratitude before bed, or I meditate, or I love to play games with my kids. We'll sit down and play Rummy Cube or AC Doocy before bed and just have time together. Then I sleep really peacefully.
Right.
And have happier dreams, and I wake up in a better mood. So we're always affecting ourselves, and we have to pay attention to how we're treating ourselves and how we're showing up for ourselves, and choosing to take the actions that support us instead of those that deplete us. And that can be really hard. We're a media consumption society, and I get it. But today I was doing work for Spirit Cafe, and I looked up the top Apple podcasts, and they're all murder, mayhem, chaos, crime stuff, every negative thing. And I thought, well, gosh, no wonder people think the world's a horrible place. It's what they're looking for. It's what they're looking at. It's where they're immersing themselves.
Right.
I have very careful happiness hygiene. And just like I take a shower every day, I also have specific hygiene around what I consume in my mind. And I'm a happier person because I'm careful about that consumption. Careful and mindful. I like to use the word mindful more than careful.
Right. We talk a lot about that because I'm an empath. So I have the same, for different reasons, but the same kind of thing. I have to be really, really careful about what I look at, what I watch, what I listen to. So it's the same kind of thing. But do you know how many people, including myself, catch up on the news first thing in the morning? Or catch up on the news right before they go to bed? I mean, because I remember that our growing up, I would always come in and my mom and dad would be reading the paper. Mm-hmm. So news first thing in the morning, and then 10 o'clock at night was always the 10 o'clock news, and you watch that and go to bed. So a whole country that's kind of been wired to do that, right?
Yes.
For generations.
Right. And I'm not saying don't ever watch the news. I'm just saying limit the consumption and move it forward or backward, right? Yeah, I would listen to it in my car only. That was my rule. I would only listen to it in my car on the way to or from work. That was it.
Oh, that's a great idea. That's a great idea.
Yes.
And that's great too, because you're going to work. So you're kind of having something to get you out of that and distract you from it.
Exactly. Because you're going to have to focus on something different. And I've already taken the time in the morning to do my yoga, do my meditation, have my coffee, so I've already taken that time to be quiet as I get ready in the morning.
Right. What is your morning ritual, Tamara?
That is it. I literally keep my yoga mat on my bedroom floor. Mm-hmm. And I will roll it out first thing after, go to the bathroom, come back to my yoga mat, do at least 5. It only has to be 5 minutes of yoga or stretching if that's the time that I have. Mm-hmm. Anywhere from 5 to 30 minutes of yoga, and then anywhere from 5 to 20 minutes of meditation, depending on my day, depending on the time I have. Some weeks I have my kids, some weeks I don't. So I have a lot more time when I don't. And then I go and I take my shower. And when I do that, my getting ready in the morning, the shower, sometimes I'll just choose silence. And sometimes I'll choose a podcast. I might watch your channel, or I might watch any of the new, fun, interesting people that I've been introduced to since we met you. Or I'll listen, I'll review one of John and my podcasts, or I'll listen to something completely different, or a book, but something that's feeding me a little bit.
Right.
I'm learning something new. Maybe I'm listening to, really good coaching questions, or maybe I'm listening to a spiritual book. I'm listening to Brian Weiss right now. And, just something that's piquing my curiosity and teaching me something and opening me up to more
Right.
wisdom. Yeah.
Well, and the kind of, as we're talking about this, and I'm looking at you, and I'm looking at the visuals behind you. What do you have to say about that kind of thing, about the things we see around us? What is your home like? What do you have to say about, like, the way that we have our rooms? And I'm going to get into a whole thing about, but in general, about like color and things like that. Or like if you have a really messy room or something, what does that do?
I think that matters more than color. Yeah. I mean, there's a whole science behind color that I don't know, right? But actually this morning I took 15 minutes to clean my desk off, to vacuum all around it. I've got 4 cats. It gets hairy. And because last night when I looked into my room, I came into my room, my office is in my room, which is why I have this lovely screen. And I thought, gosh, this place is a mess. We clean up what we nourish ourselves with, what we consume. We also want to be mindful of our environment, because everything's energy, right? Everything is energy. And so if we have a highly cluttered, messy space, our energy is going to feel messy and cluttered. And so this is a really fun and interesting one with my kids, to see how different they are, because one of them wouldn't notice if she walked through a hurricane, I swear to God. And the other daughter, I have a son too, but he's also very easy. But my other daughter is very much like, the space needs to be a certain way so that I can feel good. She's very attuned to the energy of the space. And it's going to be different for everyone. You're empathic, so you feel other people's emotions really strongly. I would imagine that the energy of a space also impacts you quite strongly.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. And so we do want to be mindful of our environment and tidy up that clutter and get rid of what we don't need, because it also clears our internal energy.
Right. That's something I learned being a preschool teacher, because we'd have these times, these kind of like extended periods of free play. It was a play-based preschool, so lots of free play. And what we would notice, and we'd have 12 3-year-olds in a tiny classroom. And what we'd notice is that there'd be a rise kind of in the volume and the chaos. And so as soon as that would happen, one of us would start picking stuff up so that it was the space was kind of cleared, and the other one would put on classical music, and you would just feel the tension just lower like that. And it was so interesting. It was always just like this social experiment we would do almost every day, it was very interesting. But you're right. And some are more sensitive to that than others, but I guess know yourself, I guess, well enough to know.
And I mean, so much of everything we're talking about is really about self-awareness, right? Because there are like thousands of different tips and tricks I could share, and I have 1,000 because everyone's different, right? And so I have to tune into my clients and to a room of people and see, okay, what is going to serve this particular individual or group? And I very much tune into something coming through me. Like, I don't think that I know all the answers, but when I'm working, especially directly with a client or a small group, I will hear what I'm supposed to share with them. I just heard this book title. You should look into this book. This is the book for you, because that's what I heard. So I'm just sharing what I was told. And so, and that clutter experience matters too, right? Like, if my energy is all cluttered, if the space I'm in is all cluttered, then those messages don't come through me, and I'm here to be of service. So I need to make sure that I clean up my vessel so that I have the tools that I can share that are right for each person that I work with, so that I can have that knowing. Because if my mind's a mess and it's cluttered with all these other images and thoughts and junk, then the message doesn't come through clearly, and I'm not of service.
Right. And I completely relate with that. And I know that people watching relate with that as well. And that's something that has also come through for people when on the channel, when I'm helping people to deal with everything going on. Spirit has always come through with the message that you need to start here. You can't really service the world and service if this is miserable and angry and upset and scared and all of these things. Whatever you do, you're infusing that energy into that action.
Absolutely.
So you have to start here and then act. Make sure you're okay and you're feeling good. And so that is completely in line with the messages I've gotten again and again and again. So to switch gears just a little bit, on your channel, you talk about something called the passion test. So can you explain what that is and talk a little bit about that?
Absolutely. It's one of my favorite subjects, and it is my favorite tool, one of my favorite tools of all time for personal transformation and development. And it's what helped me transform my own life. So it is a process that helps you identify the 5 things that matter the most to you in your life right now: how you want to feel, what you want to be doing, what you want to have in your life, from and every aspect, environment to relationships with others and self, your spirituality, your career, everything, every aspect you can imagine. You can write it down. So I ask clients to write their list. When my life is ideal, I am, and you fill in the blank 10 times in the present tense, as if it's already happening, and really feel into the life that you'd love to be living. That would be your ideal life. And I can't claim development of this process. I learned it from Janet Bright-Atwood, who is amazing and was certified by her, trained personally by her and her master trainers to facilitate the process of the passion test. And once you get clear on the 5 things that matter most to you, then we teach you how to align your life with those things so that you're choosing in favor of them, so that each day becomes more like that ideal life and more fulfilling and more joyful. And I love this process because it helps us get really honest about our current lives and what we really want to be experiencing. And then once you've got that written down, you start moving toward it. And it really can feel like magic when you finally prioritize what really matters. People think they know. Oh no, my family matters. That matters. My exercise, the gym matters.
Right.
But when they get down to being really specific, new things emerge. And I really encourage great specificity. So like, okay, but what about exercise serves you and lights you up? And really it's about getting back to the heart of you, right? What lights you up from within? What makes you feel purposeful and meaningful and brings meaning and purpose into your life? Because the happiest people in the world create meaning in their lives, and they do things each day that bring meaning and feel on purpose. And so when we get clearer on what our passions are, our priorities in life, and then we honor that and we move toward them, every day really does get better and better. And it's like, this was my experience, and this is what I've witnessed with others, my clients. It's like we're covered up with a lot of dust. And when we get clear on the passions, it's like just wiping off layer after layer after layer until we kind of emerge and the light can hit us again and we beam joy and it comes from within. And it's really just one of the most amazing tools that I have ever used and continue to use or ever taught. And when people really commit to it and devote themselves to themselves, their lives expand, their hearts expand, and it's just so beautiful, Kim. It's my favorite thing in the world.
I can tell. I can tell. I mean, you light up when you talk about it.
Mm.
You can tell that it is something, there is something that is very connected to you soul wise that has to do with this.
Yeah, Janet looked at me at the
Yeah.
training when I stood up to do a practice presentation, and she said, "This is your dharma." And I
Yeah,
said,
you can see
"I
it.
know."
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. And it sounds like what you're also talking about, which is something we call manifesting, right? Because
Yes.
you're kind of you get yourself into you meet the vibration of what you want. You start to
Yeah.
kind of just exude it or live it or be in
Yeah, you're
that
kind of attuned
even
to it,
before it's
right?
there. Yes, right.
Yes.
In tune with it. Exactly. And in that process, Tamara, how important is, I'm a huge believer in intention. When I do this work, and when I, anything that I do, I go back and I think, okay, now what is the intention behind this? Am I just doing this because, I think it's cool? What is my motivation? What is behind this? And so how important is, do you go into that, like what is your intention behind this? Is it, because what I find is that sometimes, I can think, well, I want to do this or that, but when I go back and look at the intention's kind of empty, or the intention's not really there. So I
Right.
have to approach it a different way, and then it's like, okay, this is right, this is what I want to do. It helps you to kind of, I don't know, maneuver what you're really trying to do and why. Get
Yes.
your why straight.
Intention is a
Yeah.
huge part of the passion test process. In fact, that's part of the formula: intention, attention, no tension, or I flip it to the affirmative, total ease. So the intention, an intention is consciously stating what you choose to create in your life. And so all of those passions are in fact your intentions. So
Mhm.
like my number one passion right now, and I keep my current list next to my desk or on my desk, is I speak up confidently from the heart and easily express my wants, needs, and desires. And the intention behind that is my own emotional health and integrity, right? So if I'm teaching others to create this life that they love, then I also have to be doing that. I have to be walking my talk. I have to be in integrity. And otherwise the energy is off. We don't
Mhm.
resonate quite, and I can't get that lesson through. And so my intention for that is to be, again, I'll go back to being of the highest service to others, and first by being of the highest service to myself. And I can feel it when I'm not, in a relationship, whether it's my mom or my boyfriend or my kids. If I'm not sharing lovingly something that is weighing on me, then I feel out of integrity and I feel heavier, and life doesn't flow quite the same.
Mhm.
And so when my intention is to be authentic and expressive and have, another one is a liberated emotional flow, then I have to take action toward that consistently, and then be compassionate when I mess up. And that's what keeps us moving forward, knowing your why. That, I love Simon Sinek too. The why matters. Know why you're doing something. And so when clients will write passions that feel a little bit empty, that's the question I ask them. Well, why do you want that? Let's go deeper. What will it get you to work out for an hour every day? What will that get you? If that's your passion, what do you want it for? Well, I want to feel better in my body. Okay, that's a little better. What do you want that for? Well, I want to be able to see my children grow up. Okay, good. Why? Because family really matters. Okay, why? So we go deeper and deeper,
Right. Right.
until they get to like the core of it. And I always tell new clients specifically, the first time you take the passion test, it's probably going to be pretty surface level. And that's okay, because
Right.
we're just peeling layers,
Right.
right? Peeling layers.
Right.
And so subsequent lists are deeper. And, I gave this to a group of teenagers yesterday, And it was so interesting to see the vast differences. There were a couple of boys who were literally like, I want to be a WWE superstar or cage dive with sharks. And then you had a couple of young ladies who were like, I want a deep connected relationship with God. I want to speak my truth in everything that I do. I want to, and they were just so beautiful and deep spiritual level passions. I was like,
right.
This is so good. It's so vast. There's so many, we're all starting and moving through very different places in our journeys. And it's just really, really beautiful. So there's no right or wrong. It's all learning and self-discovery.
And it kind of makes me think when you talk about teenagers that, because you're talking about, you kind of have dust on you. Could some of that dust be people placing on you what they think you should do or what you think you should be? If you grew up as, a beautiful little girl or a handsome little boy, and your parents grew up telling you need to be a model, you should be a model, you should be a model. And talk about how some of those expectations or things that people can put on you, how that can affect you as well, how that can affect what you think you want, but you don't really want that. Is that the passion test? Is that part of those layers that you peel away of like, my mom and dad wanted me to be a doctor and I'm in medical school right now and I hate it. Yes. I don't want to be that.
Yes.
Does that come so out?
Exactly for that.
Yeah. What kind of process is that?
Yeah. So this is that process of uncovering. And so as I prepare people to make their list, we talk a lot about this. This is for you, not everyone around you. It might feel selfish because we're kind of, programmed to think that paying attention to our own wants, needs, and desires is selfish. And I say programmed, and I mean literally programmed, because between the ages of birth and even before birth to about 7 years old, our brains are in a brainwave state of that's the same as meditation or hypnosis. We're literally soaking in everything that we witness, and that is getting programmed into us. And so later in life, we have these thoughts and beliefs that aren't necessarily our own. And so I actually have one of my young ladies in my class who her intention for signing up for this enrichment, because it's voluntary, is to learn what she wants from her life instead of what all the people in her life want from her, or for her. And so,
well, and Tamara, and not to I just want to interject real quick, is that not only do you have like people, but you've got like cultural things, some cultures are more like you do what your parents want you to do and you follow the family footsteps and that kind of thing. And then religious things as well that may be put on you as a young, which I know you talk about on Spirit Cafe, but but go ahead. but continue where you were going. But I just wanted to add that because that's also more layers and more layers that can confuse you.
So true. You're exactly right, Kim. It's all of those layers. And that's exactly what I meant by the dust, so that we can uncover what we really want, what feels good and right for us, instead of everyone else around us telling us what they want. And it is really about that self-discovery, self-awareness, and self-honoring, because I fully believe that if we're doing what we're doing in the world because other people think it's what we should be doing, it doesn't feel good. And even when I say that out loud, it lands really hard and low in my belly. Right? It's not what we're here. We did not get put on this planet to only do what other people think we should do. We have these beautiful desires and dreams in our hearts because, in my opinion, source or spirit or God or yada yada, as John and I like to call it, whatever you call it, put them there for a reason, to be expressed. And that is us expressing God through us. And those dreams are meant to be lived. They're not meant to be squished by all the people around us. And it can be so hard. It can feel so hard to break out from what everyone else is telling us and all that noise. And that's why it's so important to implement practices in our lives of silence and quiet so that we can hear ourselves.
That is beautiful. And what if if I've gone through my whole life listening to, first it was my parents, and it was my first husband, and then it was, I was a mom. So I had these, what if my whole life has been like that? Is it ever too late
No,
to come back to yourself?
never, ever, ever, ever. I don't even care if it's your deathbed. It is never too late. And I check all those boxes too. My parents, my religion, upbringing, my first husband, my only husband so far, but he's my ex now.
Yeah.
And my children, we have all these roles and identities.
Right.
And we feel like we are of service. We're naturally wanting to serve others, but we've lost the point of doing it for us as much as for them. And because people will call us selfish, and people will say, well, no, you can't just, I'm disappointed in you. What do you think you're doing? This is what you're supposed to do, because you're right. Culture says so, church says so, the world says so. And so we really have to cultivate this inner strength. Just like we build muscles through exercise, we have to build these courage muscles to live our own truth. And I deeply feel that that's what we're really here for, that we're really here to come out from under those layers of programming and remember the truth from our soul, from our spirit.
That's exactly right. I could not agree more. We're here, and living life on earth. I have been told many times, many readings, that it's a creative process. It's creative. That's what we're doing. We're creating. And whether that means creating in art or whatever we're doing, and you doing your beautiful work in service to others, or whatever we're here to do, it's our creation, our own creation, that we're here to express, right?
Yes.
I love this conversation. And Tamara, tell people where they can find you, what you do, what kind of things you offer, where they can find you, what they can, just tell everybody where to find Tamara.
Well, I do have a YouTube channel, as you mentioned in the beginning, so that's an easy hop for a lot of your viewers.
Right.
And then I have a website, which you can either get there through tamarazoner.com or alifeyoulovenow.com. And I currently am offering limited one-on-one packages or standalone passion tests. I start every client with the passion test. So whether they do that as a one-off and then sign up for a package, or just sign up for the package and then the passion test is incorporated in that, totally up to them and where they're at, in their lives right now for time and energy and financial ability. And that's through my website. And I'm always like sharing little nuggets on Instagram and Facebook. And I do also have a private Facebook group for people who want to continue the conversation privately online. Right. And now with YouTube, I have to say that I am falling in love with the YouTube viewership, because they're so beautiful, and they're willing to engage in these conversations, and they're expressive, and it's really fun to interact. And then if any of your viewers happen to be local to the Detroit metro area, I also run an in-person meetup, and we meet once a month. And throughout the pandemic, we have been meeting in places and spaces where we can physically distance but socially connect. So we've met in parks, we've met in empty seasonal greenhouses, we've met wherever we can be together and still be distanced and not necessarily have to wear a mask. So airflow and all of that. So if anyone's around the Detroit area, it is on meetup.com, and it's Create a Life You Love. And yeah, it's an amazing group of of humans just like you and me and
Oh,
John
good.
and all the people who watch your show and tune in. So yeah, find me. And my name is pretty unique. So if you Google me, you'll
Yeah,
find
yeah.
me.
Can find you. Well, thank you so much, Tamara. I just appreciate this so much. I think it will it spoke to me. I think it will speak to a lot of people out there that are moving through this crazy time right now. So I really appreciate it. Thank you.
So grateful that you invited me to be here. Thank you so much. And I know your
Anytime.
viewers are so fabulous and love you so much. And I know why.
Thank you. Well, thank you. And I appreciate it. And thank you guys. I will see you next time. Bye.